Hey everybody, thank you for joining me for this 24-hour tribute to Timberg, also known as Avicii. The next person that I'm going to be speaking with is an individual who was instrumental in helping to blossom Tim's career, and he was the connecting link between me and Tim to get in the studio for the first time. This is Neil Jacobson.
How are you, Aloe? Thank you for having me. It's an
Hi, Neil.
honor to be a part of it, and I'm really appreciative of you doing this in general. It's a beautiful thing.
And thank you. I know that there are so many people that loved Tim's music and loved Tim. I feel like the best thing that we can do to honor him is at least once a year spend some time thinking about him, talking about him, and sharing his music, spreading the legacy.
Awesome.
So I just wanted to get in and, I know you and a lot of the people behind the scenes know you and the work that you did with Tim, but I think it's important for fans to understand, especially his relationship with you, so that they can know how you were dramatically, effective in helping to his career to grow. When did you first hear about Avicii?
So the first time I heard about Avicii, there was this festival in America called the Identity Tour. And it was kind of like trying to take a dance festival and put it on the road. So it was a different city every week. Joel Zimmerman was putting it together, and I saw this. I saw the fourth headliner was this Avicii guy, and I'd never heard of him before. And I asked Joel about him, and Joel was like, "This kid is going to go." And I didn't put together that Timberg and him were the same person at that point. I just seen the name Avicii.
What year would you say this was?
What's that?
What year would you say this was?
I'm always really terrible at
Is this around
years.
Levels time or before Levels?
Yeah, it was right at the beginning of Levels. Levels was out for maybe 2 weeks at this point.
Okay.
And it was blowing up in Europe, and they had put him on early. So whatever year that is, don't even tell me. It makes me feel old. But I heard it, and Joel introduced me to Tim, and right away, I went crazy. And I signed him to Interscope with Troy Carter, and Jimmy Iovine, and that was the beginning. It was remarkable.
So that project, or the projects that he did prior to his first solo album, which was True, were all released from that time when you signed him through Interscope.
Yeah. No, we had True. It's complicated. We signed Levels, and then we had
a single. Okay.
We just signed the single with an option, so we put out Silhouettes as well. Ash Panori, who was his manager and a really shrewd businessman, only would give us singles rights for that point. At that point, so we only had a couple songs to put out. And then after Silhouettes, Ash wanted to try a few other record labels, so they put out another record through Warner Brothers and another record through Republic Records. But I got lucky enough that when I signed Levels and we did a great job with it, I got to meet Ash and I got to meet Tim, and I spent some time in the studio working on the Levels remixes, where we were trying to get different vocalists to try additional top lines over the record. And in that experience, I started to get, it was the beginning of popping the hood, of understanding the kind of production and genius that these guys were. And, the process of rolling out records and having so much success so quickly is such an overwhelming thing for everybody. We sort of, kind of like lost touch a little bit. I feel like I got a little separated after Silhouettes. They wanted to try another record label. It was, by all means, they're right, and we were happy to do it. But I stayed friends with the guys. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call from Ash, who said, "Hey, Tim is going to come out to LA to work on his album, and he wants you to help him with it." And I was like, "Sure, whatever. We'll see what happens."
As a friend, because this wasn't
as a friend, as a collaborator, as an A&R. I was his A&R. I A&R Levels, so I was A&Ring, which is kind of the person from the record label side that helps out with anything involving the music, the studio, helping to oversee the project through the building. There's, Interscope Records is one of the biggest record labels on earth. So you kind of have one person that helps drive it through the building, and that was me for Avicii. And again, I think that we clicked musically. I was doing a lot of things in dance music at the time, and in pop music and in pop crossover. I had the Black Eyed Peas and LMFAO, and I was managing Robin Thicke and Jeff Basker and a bunch of guys. So, but again, if there's a lesson I learned through one of the many, many lessons I learned in the whole thing was I truly had no expectations. I figured the deal was going to be $1 trillion. I didn't know if we were going to be able, if I was going to be able to get corporate to do it. There were so many complexities that I just kind of made a decision in my mind that I just was proud to know Tim and to be involved with an incredible musician. And I figured, let's go make some records. And so Tim flies out, rents this fucking crazy house in the hills. And we started to set up a couple sessions and think of some ideas. And I remember at this point, John Janik had taken over Interscope, and John's one of my really, really good friends. And I told John about what we were doing. And I said, look, they can go record this anywhere they want, but I'm really close with them. I think they should record it in the Interscope studios, which, usually you don't have access to if you're not part of Interscope.
Yeah. So you're talking about across the street from the Interscope offices. Jimmy Iovine built a studio called No Excuses because he was tired of people having an excuse. Oh, I couldn't get studio time, or there was no engineer, there was nowhere to rehearse. So he put a rehearsal space, a studio space, and you could rehearse your dance music, you could shoot your music video. It was also a showcase venue as well, right? So no one had an excuse to not get it done because it was right there, and they had top priority to Interscope artists. And you're saying at the time, Avicii wasn't an Interscope artist,
right?
But you wanted to make it available to him, and that's okay.
Yeah, it was a big piece of it. And, some of it was because I was just lazy. I could walk across the street to the studio, and I didn't want to drive across town to go and supervise the sessions or whatever. And I was like, let's just make it here. Again, it was one of these true, let's just see what happens, who knows. And John was cool. John was like, let's do it. And so we started doing the sessions there. And it started to take form. But I'll tell you, a big piece of it was that, it's kind of like the story's been told before, and it's absolutely ridiculous. But I was playing golf. I love golf. And I played golf with this guy, Mac Davis, who is one of the great songwriters of all time. I think he was about 75 at the time. And
because he'd written songs for Elvis, and that kind of in that era.
He wrote for Elvis, for a bunch of those guys. He was an artist himself. He had a TV show on NBC, the Mac Davis Variety Show or something like that. Mac, sorry that I'm not saying the correct title, but he was a big star in the late 60s and 70s, which kind of after seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was kind of he was a star and sexy at that time. But he was he was a country singer mostly. He kind of did country crossover to rock. But he's from Texas, from Lubbock, Texas. And whenever I play golf with Mac, a great golfer, he'd say, son, I still got a little gas left in the tank if you have any young artist that wants to write with me. And I was like, Mac, let's figure something out. So I told Tim about it, and it's kind of a beautiful insight to Tim's openness, which is a really important component of his genius. I was like, I got this guy, Mac Davis. We're always looking for great songwriters, and we're going to a lot of the pop guys, a lot of the R&B guys, but wouldn't it be sick to just try something totally left field? And Tim was like, absolutely, get him in. And so I brought Mac over to the Interscope studios.
Okay, so Mac Davis is, for lack of a better word, is coming from the world of country, so
For
to
sure.
speak.
100%. Nashville.
Was Tim already going that direction before he met Mac
No,
Davis?
no, not at
Okay,
all.
so this golf meeting, this golf
Yeah.
moment, pretty much defined the true album.
By the way,
I hadn't
like,
heard that story. That's
oh
that's
yeah, no,
pretty
this
crazy.
this is how it happened, and it's really, I feel, just, I guess I almost want to say I'm kind of pathetic that this was not a market research project where we really focused on a sector that we felt. It was none of that. It was this Mac. Why don't you check out Avicii? I think you could write a song, and I bet you he could put a dope beat underneath it, and it could be kind of cool. And I mean, there was an element of like Mac's genius, and Tim is a genius, and I did think obviously putting two incredible people together, and that Mac. I mean, in all seriousness, Mac and I do talk a lot about. He talks a lot about the construct of a song, what makes a brilliant song, understanding how to set up a chorus through tension and release of the lyric, and to be, all these different things that we would talk about on the golf course about our love for songwriting. And Tim is somebody who's super into that as well. So it was really about putting two special artists together, but it was not about let's create a new direction for Avicii. Tim was just trying to find amazing people to work with. And again, as I say this kind of as I think about it as I say it, it applies to you as well, right? He just wanted to know that whoever he worked with in the room was a special musicianship, understanding music, not, pretty good musician, great Instagram following, whatever. Right. He wanted great musical artists. Mac was a great musical artist, and that was what was attractive to Tim. But I will say there was a lot of comedy. It was like I'm walking Mac Davis. He's got a cowboy hat on and a guitar, and he's 75 years old. And I'm walking him through the Interscope Studios where, Kendrick Lamar and his crew are like,
right, crossing paths.
There's just like
hoodies.
It was really, really funny. And it actually was happening. Kendrick was making his album while Avicii was making his records. And he came in, they did Black and Blue. Mac played in Black and Blue, which I think was one of the first kind of moments that Tim started to put this whole idea together about what they could start to do. And around that time, my spiel is I would go in, I'd introduce everybody. Tim, it barely talks. Mac barely talks. You barely talk. Most people barely talk in the beginning of a studio session. So I'm kind of like the loud, like, hey, so Aloe, he loves this kind of stuff, and Tim loves this. And I just kind of make a fool of myself.
Yeah, you're trying to be a matchmaker in the moment.
To get everybody talking. And then I leave, and then I bounce. I do my shtick for about 30 minutes, and I'm gone, and I walk across the street. And I had put Mac and them together. Maybe it was like the second day of Mac and Tim doing their thing. And I walked back across the street and talked to John Eamon. And I told him what we were working on. He's like, yo, Aloe Blacc. And I was like, yes, Aloe Blacc is perfect.
So John Eamon's my A&R.
Yeah.
Neil was Avicii's A&R. John Eamon was basically my man in the building being Interscope Records, who signed me, brought me in to record music because he had heard I Need a Dollar and seen the whole Good Things album. He came to see me in New York and then came to see me again in like Vegas to sign me. He would have known at that point what you might have been working on, and so just kind of threw me in the mix.
Right. But, he is my boy. He's one of my best friends at the company, or at the time. And he, I do think that that's a component of what we do, right? It's just like really being aware of each other's stuff and what we're doing. And it was a big deal that Avicii was recording at Interscope. People were like, whoa, is Avicii in the studio? Why is Avicii in the studio? He's not signed here. Are you
Right.
signing him? And I was like, I think I'm signing him. I may sign him. I don't know what's going to happen, but
Right.
you know what? He's making the record. I want to help him. I want to stay close to it. And he was like, and the second the Aloe conversation came up, the second you came up, and then I brought it to Tim, who was in the middle of doing these Mac sessions. That was when we were like, wow, let's do this. Then again, I'm playing golf, and I'm playing golf with Mike Einzinger, and we had some keyboard player set up for you guys. I forget who was set up or who was supposed to be in the studio, but they canceled. And you were going in with Tim, and I'm playing with Mike. Mike Einzinger is the guitar player for Incubus, and I'm like, Mikey, I got a random one for you. You want to go in with Avicii and Aloe Blacc? I think it could be kind of cool. You know, we're working on this thing. It's who knows, but might try a day. I mean, it was that much brilliant thought. It was being on the 16th hole with the guy going, oh, you know what? I need a guitar player. And so then Mike and you and Tim did the session, and that's when the magic happened. You can take it from there.
I never would have imagined that, you know, a few holes of golf would lead to such a magical combination. You know, the first song that I recorded with Tim was Mac Davis's Black and Blue. And I think there was a conversation around Mike Shinoda, who got in touch, who was with Tim at some point.
Yes.
From Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park. From the story that Mike Shinoda tells is that Tim played him Black and Blue, and he said you should definitely consider Aloe Blacc. That may have been the two things happening in tandem. You going to speak to Eamon at the same time as Tim speaking to Mike Shinoda. So he got in touch with you, I guess, somehow, and then got to me to
You're kidding. All right, here's what I think. I'm going to tweet that a little bit. Here's what I think happened. I think I told Tim about Aloe, and Tim told Shinoda.
Okay.
And I think Shinoda
confirmed it.
Oh, that's a great idea. Aloe would be perfect for that. You should totally do that. I think, because I'm pretty sure the Genesis. All right. And by the way, I'm not. It's Eamon.
No, you can own it, bro. It's you.
No. It's that. By the way.
You really already did the Mac Davis connection, because that really sparked the entire folktronica moment that Tim helped to usher in, right? Like that was.
Let this be a lesson. Like honestly, it's just luck. It's not even luck. I had nothing to do with it. I mean, the only thing that I had to do with it was literally being in the right place at the right. The ball bounced off the back of my head.
Well, that's the beauty of good A&R. Look, I mean, you were in the building with Jimmy Iovine, who's I'd say one of the greatest, along with Clive Davis and Geffen, right? To be able to put talent together and recognize what magic can happen. You're not the ones creating the melodies and recording the songs and the instruments, but you have this higher level view of what is possible. And it is important, and it is something I think of value, and it's tremendously of value to me because it changed my career in such a dramatic way. It definitely changed Tim's career. He was already on a parabolic rise. I think this definitely catapulted him to legendary status. Levels was like, that's great. You're gonna be a dance hero for a long time. Wake Me Up put him at, you're basically the dance hero of all time.
I mean, forget dance, right? Like it transcends. Right. It plays. How many people have been married to Wake Me Up? You know, how many people have walked down there? How many people? The depth and magic of that moment when that song came out officially. By the way, not when we played it in Miami and the whole thing bombed.
I know.
The second time it came out.
Right.
And people started to really connect to it. And the second it is, I mean, look, you know, there are a handful of things in my life and my career that I can look back on and feel like, wow, I watched that thing happen from, to just see it happen. Again, be a part of it, not be a part of it, just proximity to spectating. It's probably got to be probably the biggest. I have to think about them. Billie Eilish, she's watching that happen from the start. That's been amazing.
Right.
I'd say Black Eyed Peas, the whole movement to I Got a Feeling, Boom Boom Pow, the end, that album, watching that come together and then be gigantic around the world. Uptown Funk, that was crazy. And
yeah, those are huge moments.
No, but I was just saying, point being, like, I don't know that the Avicii thing, the speed at which that happened, the velocity, Billie took years. Billie has been incredible, but it's taken a few years for that she started and really was consistently releasing beautiful music. It was getting some good festival spots. It was none of these, she didn't have gigantic smash hits out the gate. Tim, just the Avicii brand,
It's already huge.
And within 6 months of levels, I remember the New Year's show. It's got to be 2011, I guess. You can cross-reference this because I'm an idiot and I don't remember years. But that first New Year's show, I remember we did New York. It was the most intense, and it was right at the explosion of dance music. So just that thing of, now it's characterized, but at the time, the concept of jumping up and down at one moment in like this packed house to music that was so driving, and he was so new, and anybody who was anybody tried to get tickets to that New York show. It was like it was a riot outside, and to watch all of that happening, and then to see it just flow through the globe, through China, Singapore, all these places that had never had dance music before. It was unbelievable.
Do you feel like there could ever be another album of Tim's music?
Aloe. What, are you kidding me? I've got 30 or 40 unbelievable records. Unbelievable. I Want to Be Free. I mean, come on. Right. That's just the best. It's the best. It's still the best. I am not saying this for hyperbole. The best Avicii, Aloe, the best Avicii record might still be I Want to Be Free. And that moment in I Want to Be Free, which is another, you can tell the story. We got to figure that thing out. We've got to get that record out. It is.
Yeah. So at the time, I did the math, and it looks like at the time that he was writing SOS, you had called me back in to finish up the song, and I was working with other writers to try to get the top line right. Had no idea that Tim was his head was already on to new music. He's like probably thinking, forget this old stuff. We're not gonna build off of the old stuff. Let's do all fresh, brand new. But he was always working on something new when he could find the time. I Want to Be Free was part of the sessions with my keyboard player, Peter Dyer, and and the guitar player Nile Rodgers, legendary musician, producer, artist, who was responsible for many hits that in the group Chic, La Freak, of course. He was part of some of the David Bowie hits that we all are familiar with. He was part of Get Lucky with Pharrell and Daft Punk. So those songs that we made in those sessions were really special. And I Want to Be Free was one that we knew had huge potential if we could just get the rest of the lyrics right, because we knew that the chorus and everything else felt really good. I hope that we get a chance to finish it. I know when I first started working with Tim, the song that we made after I recorded Black and Blue and before we recorded Wake Me Up was one that I felt really strongly about, and could never get him to answer a question about finishing it or what he wanted to do with it. And,
Well,
you
it's a
know,
13-minute jam. It's like it's a jam. You know, we have maybe it's 9.5 minutes. And I used to argue with him about it. And, you know, this is why Tim is the greatest, right? He knew. I was like, yeah, no, that one is sick. I was like, well, let's finish it. He's like, no, we will. And then, and this is amongst the tragedies of it all is we'll get it done. Don't worry. I know, it's one of my favorites. And I would pound him on it, and I would call. And that was when I reached back out to you when we started the new album, and I signed him to Geffen. I was like, look, this is the record. This is it. All we've got to do is finish this record. Because I don't think we had what did we have, one verse?
it was only one verse, and I just recorded it. He copied and pasted it twice to make it two verses, but he needed something new, and I wasn't even sure that those lyrics were right. It was just what I was feeling at the moment, but it would take some editing and, you know, some real attention.
And by the way, copy and paste was like the bane of my existence with Tim, because Tim would move so fast. And he would just copy and paste verses from one song to another song, and then he'd put another song to another chord. And you know, when you're doing the business of these records, it's a nightmare, because now I've got to call all the writers and go, so I remember you guys did this song and it started here. Tim brought it to here, and he actually combined it with two other songs. So we've got to, and
everybody's got to agree on making these separate things one thing. Yeah, that's what I hear happened with SOS. And he was working with Albin and Bon, and that they were basically two separate songs that they ended up mashing up because one drop was better than the other. And yeah, interesting.
The goddamn copy and paste function. If I could just strap his arms together so he wouldn't do it, everything would have been fine.
But I think that was the magic of Tim. He looked at all of these pieces like tools, and how to combine them to make the best product, because for everyone else in the world, nobody knows where this stuff is from. So
and he's just a DJ. That's what he intuitively, instinctively thinks about how things flow together, and is able to take any part from anything and put it all, you know. It's interesting. There was I think he does not get a lot of credit for his DJing. And I think there was a lot of conflict in his mind, because the shows began to become so huge production-wise that he wasn't able to actually DJ. But that he loved the art of mixing, and that I remember he was the first guy to really take me to the deep house movement. Not that this thing had been going on for 20 years. I just didn't know about places like Space in Miami. And we went to Space one night, and I remember it started at 5:30 a.m. And I was like, dude, I am exhausted. I cannot do this. And he's like, come on. And we went and we saw Luciano, and he broke down to me as he's watching his set, like the subtlety to how they've worked through the arc of each record, and that each record was just a different song form. And we would talk a lot about, I remember after that talking a lot about the art of how records are mixed, what it is to put one record into another, nuance, subtlety, texture. He really focused on that in general from his school of learning electronic music, but he applied it to vocalists. He was really, really intense about phrasing, about performance, about he had a very specific, he could articulate how he wanted an artist to enter or exit a song, how their phrase, how their cadence came in or came out. He was such a stickler for those details. And because of it, if you listen to the breadth of all of his music, you can hear it in how each of the vocalists end up performing their vocals, even though those vocalists still sound like themselves, but they sound just a little different when they're doing it with Tim, because Tim really, he cuts every vocal. No one else would. He would always cut the vocals.
Yeah.
And when we talked about you in SOS, you were the only person that we felt like you were the only guy. I'm not saying this to be nice. I'm telling you, you're the only one that he was like, yeah, no, Aloe could sing it. Aloe can sing. Like, you could cut a vocal without him being there, and he was perfectly accepting of it. And I think that for whatever it's worth from him, has got to be the highest compliment, because he's so intense about that.
It's crazy. Unfortunately, I had to cut it without him. I had the help of his collaborators on the project, but it was an intense moment to record that and to read those lyrics, to get that message from you guys, the label, asking if I would, sing the song. It was really deep. It was really deep. Just to even see that he had been writing lyrics like SOS, because I hadn't placed Tim as a lyric writer yet. Just focusing on the beats and the melodies and the sound. But these lyrics were really, really caught my attention, especially in the wake of his passing. It's it really is an honor that I've had and the privilege in my life to have worked with him. And I thank you for having put us together so that we could have those moments to be able to create something so epic for the world to share forever. There are young folks who are learning the music, learning Tim's catalog, and becoming fans and recognizing the strength and the power in the music that he created. And I'm just happy to be part of it. And I thank you for letting me into that room.
The thank you is all mine. Timmy, I love you. There is so much within all of the pain. There's so much laughter. There's so much. God, it's hard to even say it. He was such a wonderful, loving, kind, gentle, brilliant. He was one of the few who could be so intense and so focused and driven and be a visionary and all of these things that he was. And these are not, I'm not overstating how, forget the word genius, the application of time, focus, and energy that he would put into his music, how long he would spend. It was a problem. I think that it was he would be in the studio for 15 hours straight. We'd have to make him, we had to have end times for the sessions. I'd have to literally, I felt like a guy in a boxing ring trying to pull his boxer out, because if he didn't leave the studio, he'd be there for a couple days. Yeah. Yet within all of that intensity, typically many of those kinds of people, they're kind of jerks, usually kind of mean. Never once was Tim mean. He was always the kindest, most polite, nicest person, no matter how frustrated he was, no matter how angry he was, no matter how much pain he was in. He was always so kind to everybody around him. And he proved to me that you can be both. You can be both a driven genius and a beautiful soul. Yeah. I love the guy.
Yeah. We all love him. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you for sharing your time and your story.
Be good, my brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.